CIA analysts are reviewing a video. There is a man in a cave, a long beard, traditional robes, threatening to destroy America. The analysts look at this and see primitive conditions, limited resources and a low-tech operation. They assess him as a low-level threat. That was Osama bin Laden. What they've completely missed is that the cave wasn't just the hiding spot. The Prophet Muhammad received his revelations in a cave. The robes, the appearance, every aesthetic choice was deliberate religious symbolism. Every detail was crafted to signal authenticity to a specific audience. So, you have the smartest intelligence agency in the world, with one of the most rigorous recruitment processes. At some point, they were accepting only one candidate for every 20,000 applicants, and they ended up collectively blind. The question isn't whether they hired smart people. They obviously did. The real question is this: when you hire the smartest candidate, are you actually making your team smarter or dumber? My name is Jafar. I spent the last 10 years in corporate watching smart teams make questionable decisions. Hence, the HR diary, where episode by episode we're going to change that. Today, we're talking about diversity of thought. To understand what happened at Langley, I want you to look at this rectangle for a moment. This is what we will call the problem space. It's the universe of useful perspectives, insights, and experiences that are relevant to whatever challenge you're trying to solve. CIA analysts are clustered here in the corner. Why? They had the same educational background, the same cultural reference points, the same cognitive scripts running in their heads. They were individually brilliant people, I want to be clear about that, but collectively they lacked coverage in the problem space. So when bin Laden communicated through cultural coding, the analysts saw primitive conditions. They were looking at the fish and completely missed the ecosystem around it. Let me show you what I mean by that. Researchers from University of Michigan ran this elegant experiment where they invited two groups to watch the same video clips, underwater scenes with fish and plants and coral. One group was American, the other Japanese. They asked both groups to describe what they saw. The Americans concentrated almost entirely on the fish. They described individual species, their size, their movement patterns. The Japanese participants described the entire environment, the plants, the rocks, how everything in the ecosystem related to everything else. What this tells us is that culture shapes our perception and guides our attention. Western culture tends to zoom in on protagonists, while Japanese culture focuses more on the whole picture. In short, cultural background changes what you see in the foreground. CIA didn't have that cultural coverage in their problem space, so they were assessing threats through one single lens. The bipartisan commission that investigated 9/11 concluded clearly the agency failed to connect the dots. Not because the analysts weren't smart enough, but because they were clustered in the same corner. There is a term for this in social network studies. It's called homophily. It describes our tendency to bond and associate with people who are similar to ourselves. It's a scientific way to say birds of feather flock together. Now, CIA leadership was actually aware of their homogeneity. The agency ended up being overwhelmingly white, male, Anglo-Saxon, and Protestant. When people raised concerns about this, officials dismissed them. They said the CIA's mission is too serious to be distracted by social engineering. They framed the whole thing as a trade-off. You can either get diversity or you can get excellence. Pick one. Some went as far as to say that people who are different, therefore think differently, would jeopardize performance. In their heads, different meant inaccurate. And in many cases that's absolutely true. 2 + 2 = 4 unless you're in an Orwellian universe. The problem is that intelligence work isn't math. It's picking up signal from a sea of noise in wildly different cultural contexts. Let's move to corporate world. Let me introduce you to Mark. He's been a brand manager for 3 years, and when he gets tapped to create a campaign for a new product and given a budget to build his own team, he's fired up. He jumps headfirst into interviews and meets dozens of candidates. On paper, everyone looks strong, but Mark keeps finding himself drawn to a specific profile. Business degree from a target school, experience from similar companies, some even have similar hobbies. The conversations flow easily. There's this natural chemistry, and Mark thinks to himself, this is what good cultural fit feels like. So he makes his hires and starts counting down the days. Now, look at his problem space. Mark sits here in the corner. His 4 hires, they're all basically in the same place. Same background, same training ground, same mental models. Classic MMMs, mini-me's, or in this case, mini-Marks. Mark doesn't notice the problem at first. In fact, the team feels like it's performing well. Meetings run smoothly, they're confident in their conclusions because there's no real disagreement to make them second-guess themselves. This feels like high performance, but it's not. The campaign underperforms, not spectacularly, it's not a disaster that makes headlines, it just misses the mark. What Mark accidentally did was build homophily into his team structure, and confirmation bias and groupthink followed automatically. Fast forward 5 years, and Mark has climbed several ranks up the corporate ladder. He's running a larger team now with a bigger budget and more responsibility. This time when he's hiring, he's deliberate about building coverage in the problem space. He makes sure that shortlisted candidates are diverse. Different educational backgrounds, corporate experiences, generations and genders. When you look at the problem space now, you can see his team occupying different zones. This looks like an intelligent collective. But about 10 months in, Mark starts noticing something troubling. The discussions feel oddly homogeneous. Here's what happened. Mark's success over these 5 years built his reputation significantly. He's more confident now, more willing to state his opinions early and clearly in any discussion. Despite his goodwill, his team caught a nasty case of HiPPO, the highest paid person's opinion. Think of it like a gravitational force. Mark's seniority, confidence create this pull on everyone around him, and over time, it drags all of their thinking into the same orbit. The coverage shrinks, all back into the same corner. A study from a completely different domain shows just how dangerous this pattern can be. Researchers looked at data from Himalayan mountaineering expeditions. They wanted to answer a specific question. Do strong dominance hierarchies increase the risk of disaster? The answer was unsettling. Climbers from highly hierarchical cultures where deference to authority runs deep die more often on difficult expeditions. Not because they're less skilled. When you control for experience and training, their technical ability is the same. They die because they don't speak up. Sometimes its conditions change, sometimes new risks. Staying silent preserves the social order, it shows respect for the expedition leader, but it does so at the cost of safety and sometimes at the cost of life. What's striking is that this pattern only appears in group expeditions. Solo climbers from the same cultures survive at normal rates. The danger isn't incompetence, it's hierarchical thinking. When survival depends on open communication and willingness to challenge authority, deference becomes lethal. Mark's campaign wasn't a matter of life or death, obviously, but the mechanism is the same. In general, strong hierarchy and lack of psychological safety is like kryptonite to the benefits of cognitive diversity. And there is actually more nuance to its efficacy. Research shows that the positive effect of diversity depends very much on the industry. In work that's routine and standardized, mining, transportation, assembly line production, increasing diversity often increases communication costs and therefore lowers efficiency. But in creative, knowledge-intensive work, anything client-facing really, when you're trying to understand different audiences, the research proves a diversity bonus. You know how racial diversity often overlaps with cognitive diversity? So increasing racial diversity by just one standard deviation led to productivity increase of 25%. The study observed that mainly in health, legal and finance services. So, is hiring the best and the brightest a good recruitment strategy? It's a loaded question, and I think it's a wrong angle. Because the best recruitment strategy is to hire people who enrich your coverage in the problem space. Before you even get to candidates, refresh your understanding of the problem space. What does your industry require? What perspectives do you need? For instance, if you're launching a product for a diverse customer base, your team needs to reflect that diversity. But if you're doing deep technical work with a well-established methodology, then optimizing for technical depth might make more sense. Then you should evaluate the coverage you have so far and identify where you have potential gaps. And only then can you choose the right yardstick to measure for what you need. Example from Langley prove that collective intelligence emerges not only from the knowledge of individuals, but also from the differences between them. So in short, what is that mystical diversity of thought? I see it as a tool, a cognitive tool for making better decisions. Thanks for tuning in. If you found this material interesting, support the channel by clicking the like button and subscribe for more videos like this. And if you're interested in exploring diversity of thought even more, I strongly recommend Matthew Said's Rebel Ideas. Majority of the ideas and concepts I shared today in the video come from the book. The book is amazing. Stay curious, HR out.